All right, folks, welcome to this week's EDU Endpoint Office Hours. I'm Richard Balsley. Today is January 21st, and we don't have a specific topic this week, so we'll just take open Q&A from folks, but we will get to the announcements and updates that have come since the last time we met on the 10th. Actually, no, the 7th, sorry. So without further ado, let's jump right into those. So it was light for this month in terms, or the last couple weeks rather, in terms of new announcements. So last meeting we talked about Ignite. We reviewed all of the Ignite announcements that we had talked about back on December 10th. But this last couple weeks, very, very light in announcements. So the first thing around Microsoft Intune is that our Intune customer success blog posted an update around some new block screen capture controls for iOS and iPadOS for MAM protected apps. So check that out if you are managing iOS and iPadOS, that we now have block screen capture controls for MAM protected applications. I know some of you folks on here are actually using Intune today for iOS and iPadOS management, so I'm going to assume that this is probably a good thing for those of you that have been waiting for this for quite some time. Now, shifting over to Windows 365 and AVD, there was a blog post that didn't really tie into education, but I liked how we organized this to show the different Windows 365 options that are available for customers. It goes into the Windows 365 Enterprise, Frontline, and Frontline Shared scenarios that we have and how it can help with Frontline. And for some of you in the higher ed space, you do have some retail arms, might have a bookstore, various other retail components to your universities. And so this might be something to take a look at. Very high level blog, but it just goes over the different options for those that might have these Frontline scenarios that they might have to deal with within their organizations. Now, the big announcements, and I think these are the things that are going to be probably the most impactful for most of you, tie into Entra ID and specifically some of the retirements that we have coming up. The first thing to take a look at is the Azure AD Graph is retiring on February 1st. And so if you have any applications that tie into the Azure AD Graph, you want to move those over to the Microsoft Graph instead of the Azure AD Graph endpoints. So if you have any enterprise apps that are tied into this, this could affect you. So you should be able to click on this link right now in the presentation, and that should take you to the blog post that talks about this. But the thing that's probably going to impact most of us, and we've been talking about this for quite some time, so this isn't new, but the MS Online and the Azure AD PowerShell modules are retiring this year. We've made announcements on this going back to last year, and so this isn't new. But what I wanted to call out here, and what's called out in that blog post, is that both of these will end support March 30th, 2025. That doesn't mean they won't stop. They'll stop working on that date. That just means that you don't get any support from Microsoft as of that date. Now, retirement is for the MS Online PowerShell module. That will be retired in early April 2025. And then the Azure AD PowerShell module will be retired after July 1st, 2025. So there's different retirement dates of these, but the end of support date is the same for both of them. And for MS Online, there actually will be some planned outages. The dates of those, or the time frame of those outages, will actually be in if you click on the link to the blog post, it'll take you directly to what the outage is. There's a big table in there that explains. There's a table and some bullet points that explain exactly what the outage is going to entail. But if you have not moved off of these modules to the Microsoft Graph PowerShell module, or there's a new Entra ID PowerShell module. If you haven't moved to either of those yet, this is the time to do that. Retirement is coming very quick, so make sure you're doing that. And then lastly, for Entra, we posted a blog post early on this year about the top 50 features that we introduced over the last calendar year of 2024. So take a look at that just to kind of see all the stuff that we released in Entra. There's quite a few things in there. I don't have anything specific to call out, but there was a lot that we had mentioned. Now for Windows, we are in the process of rolling out a new Copilot, a Microsoft 365 Copilot chat experience. And within Windows, there's a new Copilot icon and actually a new Copilot app that is going along with that. And so we've made a post on the Windows IT Pro blog that explains this new experience. However, we also have updated our documentation guidance on how to manage that experience. So the two links here explain what the experience is and then how to go about managing that for your devices. So I go ahead and take a look at those and how you can go in either using Intune or using group policy to go and manage the new Microsoft 365 Copilot chat experience. And with that, I believe that's it. Yep. So very, very light last couple weeks. And so now I'll kind of open the floor to questions, either in the chat or if you want to come off mute, feel free to come on and we can start talking about whatever you guys want to talk about.
I don't like change.
You don't like change.
Yeah, I've trained all my help desk guys on how to use MS Online to like restore deleted accounts and force delete stuff and whatnot. Now we got to teach them how to use Graph.
Yeah, it's definitely been a challenge, and even the length of some of these commandlets is kind of comical, like how long the commandlet names are for some things. What I've personally been doing, and this is not a Microsoft recommendation. This is more of a me thing rather than a company thing. Is that because of the change that we've been making in a lot of these commandlets, I've just decided to just start using direct graph calls rather than migrating to different commandlets and different modules. Just because who knows if things are going to change again. But for me, like I kind of know how to do some of this stuff. For those that aren't comfortable with that, the modules that we provide make things a lot easier.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, it's just whatever your comfort level is. But what I do know is that if you do natively call the graph APIs, like those typically don't change often. We have made some changes to like some of the endpoints, you know, over the years, but for the most part, if we decide to deprecate a commandlet, that's probably not going to really affect how someone is directly calling the graph. So there is a give and take to that approach.
I get you. I have a little bit more confidence in like staff being able to use MS Online to like run one command and not mess it up.
Yeah, well, and then the
It's a
bigger
staffing
challenge,
issue, not so much a Microsoft issue, though.
Yeah, well, I think that the biggest challenge that we have is that there's so many PowerShell scripts that people have written and posted on their own personal blogs or websites. And if you look up something on the internet, oftentimes it's going to be calling some old MS Online module or the old Azure AD PowerShell module. And you know, as those things go out of support, a lot of those examples don't work anymore. And so you've got a lot of people that are relying on these examples that they just found on the internet that now they have to change that code that they might have put into like a scheduled task or some automation project that they're using that it's not going to work anymore, and they might not know how to change it. So that's going to be unfortunate, but you know, it's kind of the way things are. All right, what do we have in the chat here? So Roberto asks, is there a documented way to obtain Dell warranty information with Intune? Not necessarily documented. However, I believe Dell is in the new portal that we recently, we just talked about this, I think, probably a month or so ago, I think, around the new warranty dashboard that you guys have access to. I don't think I have it in my portal because I don't have Dell. I'm not a quote unquote Dell customer. Let's see here. I'll have to dig that up unless someone else has direct access to it, but I don't have anything right now that I can show on that.
I threw the hey Richard, I threw the link of the OEM integrations in the partner portal.
There it
is. For the Dell piece specifically. But I think Dell has an external site where you can get more information about that. But I think once you launch that management portal, there's a devices section.
Yep.
I just cannot confirm if warranty information is in there. But I know you can get like BIOS information and more hardware specific information from those devices. So yeah, check that out.
By the way, welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be back.
You were tardy, and you were who I was waiting for before I started.
I'm so sorry.
But welcome back.
I'm back. Hi, everyone. Great to be back.
Yeah, so the OEM integration stuff, I think, is kind of, it's sort of hidden. We don't really make this readily apparent within your tenant that this stuff exists. But yeah, if you go to this, actually, if you go directly to this link, that should take you to the partner portal's devices flyout that has HP and Dell listed in there. Okay.
And Jesse has a question. Are we going to get a Lenovo one soon?
I don't know. I've got to think, and I mean, this seems like we literally had this conversation like a month, maybe 2 months ago. But I've got to think that if Dell and HP are there and Surface is there, that Lenovo is going to follow suit. And all the major OEMs will be there.
Yep.
Yeah,
in fact, there's a feedback item on the Intune feedback portal specifically for Lenovo devices asking for that partner portal. So upvote that. Yeah,
I mean, it's not, I don't think this is our thing. This is really, I mean, this really actually takes you externally to their own, their own place to go and synchronize between them and Intune. So they need to opt in and they need to come to the table and actually want to do this. So I got to think at some point Lenovo does, but I haven't heard anything specifically.
And Lenovo's really upped their game from the management perspective, so I would say it's a matter of time.
Yeah. All right, what else we got here? Roberto's got his hand up. Do you want to come off mute?
Yeah, so what I found is with the Dell portal, basically Dell is pulling from Intune, so it's finding the devices, and then it basically ties them to like the service tag and the model and stuff like that. But they don't provide the warranty information on their site. I've used different MDMs in the past, and they were able to pull from Dell the warranty information into the MDM. So when you do a report on your devices, you can see the the warranty status, when it started, when it ended, stuff like that. One of those was Case, which was owned by Dell at the time, so I can see why they had that. And It was very handy to have that information when we're looking at doing reports end of year, like, okay, what devices are coming up for renewal next year? Whereas now there's a way to do it manually, where you can basically feed this command line tool a list of serial numbers, and then it gives you back all the warranty information from Dell. But then it's just basically a manual exercise and trying to match everything up. So I'm just hoping to see if there's a way for Intune to pull the warranty information instead of sending the device information to Dell.
So you want to pull it directly from Dell?
From Dell into Intune, correct?
Intune, yeah. That we can't do that natively today. However, as Garrett mentioned in the blog post link that he posted in the chat, the Intune expands OEM integration into the partner portal. At the bottom of that, there is a feedback link. Go to that feedback link, and that's great feedback for the team to hear. Because this is something that Dell would have to make it available, and then we would have to pull it. And I don't know if Dell makes it available and we just don't pull it, or if Dell doesn't make it available and because they don't make it available, we don't show it. So there's probably some work that has to be done on both ends to make sure that that is something that's possible.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be some kind of like client ID or something like that you provide, and so you can get access to it. I just don't know if you guys would be able to collect that from us and then present it on our behalf.
Hey, Herberto, I had to do the same thing with HP. We just pulled the inventory out of PowerShell with all the serial numbers and then emailed it to our sales rep and said, get us the warranty date information for all these devices. Made things a lot easier because I didn't have to learn an API. I didn't have to do a query. I just emailed my sales guy and he got me all that information. So if you guys have the same thing with Dell, I've done that in the past as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's one way of doing it, I guess. Yeah, that would work.
Yeah,
if you have,
I think.
Oh, go ahead.
Like, to me, I think it'd be nice to be able to just kind of see it in one place. You know, I mean, if in a perfect world, it'd be nice to see it in Intune, like what Roberto's asking. But alternative to that, yeah, if you just have like a CSV or something, you can request the info. Do you plan on, Roberto? Do you plan on tying this into like an asset management system?
That's kind of what I'm trying to do. See, how much information I can put together and then kind of tie it into some kind of asset management system. We do have our in-house fixed assets, tracking system, but it is not as flexible as as I would like to be able to put stuff in there. So that's why I was hoping to get it in Intune, and then I can pull that data and just kind of massage it a little bit and present it.
Yeah, and I don't suspect that Dell stores this information in WMI anywhere on the physical device itself, do they?
On device, you know what? I haven't thought about doing it that way. I might, yeah. I'll check and see if there's anything in there like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I want to say they don't, but it's been a while since I've had to manage, physical enterprise devices that actually have warranties and all that associated with them. So it could be that they put it there. I really don't know.
Yeah, I'll look into that. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, so Scott's asking, oh wait, hang on, I think I overlooked Aaron's. So I see we are missing out on a lot of features because we don't have an active subscription. We have A3 and A5 licenses, but I don't think that matters much. We've never set up a subscription before. Is there a way to get a free Azure subscription for a public K-12 entity, or do we need to fill out that signup.azure.com form like everyone else? I don't personally help customers stand up brand new Azure subscriptions.
Hey, Aaron, there's an Azure EDU Hours as well, and they are nothing but Azure. And I think that question might be better for them. If you have an A3 or an A5, you should have an Azure instance because you have to have something that runs your intra, right? I mean, we have a A5s and A3s, and I get a full-blown Azure instance. You just don't have a license for that or a subscription for that group. So a resource group. You might need to add a subscription though.
Yeah,
sorry, I was just going to say, like, all the resources that we've talked about in the past, like the connected cache and the workbooks for business updates. Every time I try to look into those features and go through the knowledge base articles, they all say, you need a Azure subscription, or when I try to follow the guide, they all lead me to having an Azure subscription created. So that's why I was asking that question.
Yeah, do you work with like a reseller for your Microsoft licensing?
Yeah, we do.
So generally you would go through them. They would help you stand up a new Azure subscription. And the subscription itself there's no cost to have a subscription because it's all based on usage for whatever services in Azure you're using. So something like connected cache, there's no cost associated with that. For Windows update for business reports. There's no cost associated with that. So there are some features where there's no cost associated. However, there are others that obviously do associate a cost with those.
And it could be too that when you go and you attempt to create that free subscription, that you may not have the rights. So the Azure RBAC rates are different than the rights that you would see for Entra in particular. If you're a standard Intune administrator, for example, you may not have the rights inside the Azure space to go do that. So you still modify them in Entra, but you may just have to look at rights too if you're not able to set up that free subscription.
He's a global admin.
Yeah, I'm logged in with a global admin account,
Okay.
and I still get the, Azure splash page redirect every time I try to click on a particular resource. But I'll reach out to my reseller and ask them, what they can provide.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Scott's saying or asking, when you say MS Online is being deprecated, does that mean commands like this will no longer work? And he's looking at the get Windows autopilot info PowerShell commandlet. Does MS Online have anything to do with the dash online switch? No. MS Online is a very old PowerShell module that was used to manage Office 365 and Azure AD. And over time, we developed the Azure AD PowerShell module that kind of did some very similar things. And then now we have the Microsoft Graph PowerShell module, which also does very similar things. In fact, it does even more. So all these things are kind of doing the same thing. The MS Online PowerShell module is going away. So any scripts that rely on that module, that sit on top of that module, will no longer work. So one of those, get Windows autopilot info, that commandlet from the Windows autopilot module, that did call, I think it called the Azure AD PowerShell module, if I remember right. We have since updated that module. So that module for the get Windows autopilot info, that should be up to date using the supported Microsoft Graph PowerShell commandlets, or the PowerShell module. So that all that stuff should work fine. But you might have your own internal scripts that you might have written, and if those tie into MS Online, or if they tie into Azure AD PowerShell, those will stop functioning when the deprecated and the retirement dates finally hit. Let's see. Yeah, at least answering some of that stuff in the chat. On some MDMs, it works. I mean, Carrie's comment here. I think on some MDMs, it works like a Mac OS custom attribute does as well. It gets pulled via script and then displayed in the MDM. Carrie, talking about is that about the OEM
Yeah,
warranty?
that was related to like pulling the Dell warranty info. I think on at least one platform I've worked with, we just ran a script locally on each device, and then that got displayed within the MDM console to show, and that way it was somewhat platform agnostic. You could run the correct script based on the manufacturer and show your warranty information.
Yeah. Yeah, I just don't know if Dell stores that stuff in WMI. Over the years, I think this stuff has changed, and so it's possible that they do. And if they do that, that's good. The next question then becomes, okay, I can pull it. Where am I going to store it? There's a number of ways that if you want to put it out to a CSV file and then store it on a server, you can store it. Log analytics. There's like 1,000 places you can probably think of to store the data, but natively, going back to Roberto's original question, we don't have anything natively that'll actually do that. Okay, let's see, newbie Intune question. Isaac's got a newbie question. Newbie Intune question: how do I reset the count for a configuration policy? I have had a policy running to the point that I have more successes than actual active computer devices. So from a reporting standpoint, I think what the real question is when I deploy a policy out after it's been deployed for some time, I want to just reset what the reporting data shows and just basically start from zero again. You can't really do that for an existing policy that's already been deployed. You'd have to create a brand new policy. It could be the same, actually have the same content in the policy. You just have to create a brand new one, and then you'd start from zero. But there's a bigger problem to what you're describing in that you have a number that shows I've got more devices than I actually have in my, my count is much higher than the actual number of devices I have in my organization. And a lot of that has to do with how Intune shows reporting in the console. If you've ever looked at a policy, you've probably noticed that you'll have a line item that shows that that this policy is run for the system account, and then it's also run for a user account. And so what you might notice is that over time, as you start adding all this up, the policy numbers, the numbers that have actually succeeded, might duplicate. Or it's significantly higher than what you actually have in your environment. And a lot of it just has to do with the way that we're showing both the system account running something and the actual user account that signs in. So the actual numbers themselves are going to be off because of that duplication that we do from the system account and the user that might be using that device. So you might see two things instead of just one. We're definitely aware of the behavior. I don't know I don't have any timelines on if and when that is actually going to be resolved, but it's been a problem for a very long time now. And so unfortunately, there's just no way to zero out an existing deployment without having to create a new one. Mason asks, do you know if MS will ever revisit policy sets in Intune? Looks like it hasn't been touched in 5+ years. It only supports MSI apps and doesn't support any policy created in endpoint security. I discovered the feature recently, and it was definitely helpful as a quick way to get a bunch of policies assigned. I just had a conversation about this last week. Yeah, policy sets. I would personally love for policy sets to get some more love. We haven't touched policy sets in quite a while, and especially in education, especially for those of you that have really big tenants with lots of policies, lots of apps, lots of moving parts. Policy sets make it a lot easier for you to see what's targeted to a specific group. If I could target a configuration profile plus an app plus something else, and I can put that all into one thing and then target that one thing to a group, makes it a lot easier for me to see what is targeted to a group. If I just looked at policy sets, I'd have a much smaller list of things to look through. But if I have to look through all my configuration profiles, I have to look through all my apps, and that list, for some of you people, that list takes forever just to enumerate because your tenants are so large. So there definitely can be some improvements there for policy sets. However, no one's looked at this in probably 3 years. There aren't any plans to improve on them, as far as I know. I have talked to some folks about how I think for us in education, it would be helpful to revisit policy sets, because I think there's some definite use cases that we have in education, and there's outside of education too. But I think for a lot of the stuff that we do, I think it can make a big difference for some customers that are out there. Joseph asks, our identity and access team wants to set up an app in Azure for my team to get access to Graph for executing scripts related to Intune and enter groups and devices, instead of enabling Graph access for any individuals on our team. Any experience doing that in suggestions? We're struggling to produce a comprehensive list of Graph permissions needed to give them as well. Yeah, that's so that's the correct way of doing things, is creating an app within Azure and then specifying which permissions that app has to the graph endpoints, and then creating your script to run against that app. It's very common for most. I don't know if anyone wants to come off mute and share what they're doing, or if they want to share it in the chat. But that's definitely something that that's common. I don't have any suggestions outside of to do it. You definitely should be doing that as opposed to assigning rights individually. But if anyone wants to share their experience in doing this, I think most of you that are doing any sort of automation are probably doing this today. All right. David asks, we have the Windows 11 23H2 feature updates set up as optional in Windows Update for Business. So it shows up in Windows Update for clients. For some reason, it is staggering when this option shows up. Some are immediate after check-in, but some can take as long as a couple of months, even on newly imaged computers. Is there any way to remove the staggered part, or just, hey, Patty, you're on. All right, you are now muted. Some are immediate after check-in, but some take as long as a couple of months, even on new image computers. Is there any way to remove the staggered part and just force it to show up on all that are eligible upon client check-in? No, the intent of this is to actually make it staggered. I don't understand why it would take months to show up on newly imaged machines. Well, actually, if it's newly imaged, there are some restrictions that we put on Windows Update initially when you image a machine, or when you re-image a machine, for updates to show up immediately for a user. That doesn't surprise me. If it takes months, that is very strange. I wouldn't expect it to take that long. But there could also be some situations where you might have safeguard holds that are in place depending on the hardware. I'm not saying that that's going to be the case in your situation, but that is something that can come up. But in what we generally see, though, in this kind of situation where we want to deploy the latest feature update, or if you started with 22H2 for Windows 11, you want to move to 23H2. In general, what we would recommend is you don't just make the update available. You can make it available for users that you want to test with. Like if you want to give them the opportunity to just go ahead and upgrade, today, and they can go and just go to Windows Update, check for updates, and then it shows up for testing purposes. But at some point, you're probably going to want to get everyone on the same release of Windows 11. And if that's the case, then you wouldn't make it available. You would obviously want to make it required. And so in general, what most will tend to do is they'll probably do that in the summer. They'll set their policy in the summer to require everyone to go to Windows 11 23H2 or 24H2 when most people aren't around. But as far as just not seeing it and it should be there, that might be something that support would have to help you work on. You might have to take a look at the devices, take a look at the logs, and even probably take a look at the service on the back end and see, are these devices actually being offered the update on the Windows Update for Business deployment service? And if they are being offered it on the service side of things, why isn't the device seeing it? And that's something that we here can't really help you with. That would be something that support would have to help you with. All right, Christopher asks, with the fires here in SoCal causing issues and school power outages, we were looking for ways to send notices out to our devices. We found the organizational messages feature in 365, which looked perfect, but found that the advanced features are locked to E3 and E5. Do you know if there is any chance of these features coming to A3 and A5? I haven't heard anything on this in a long time, but when we initially released organizational messages, it was a Intune feature. It wasn't actually an M365 feature. We have since moved them out of Intune into the M365 admin portal. However, you're right that they're only E3 and E5. They don't extend out to A3. At the time, I pushed for this to come to education because to me it seems kind of silly that we would keep this from education, given that there's a lot of instances where we do need to let people know what's going on. Not just about fires, but there's all sorts of different reasons where this would be very helpful for education customers. So we submitted the feedback, but there was no appetite, if you will, to get that added to our A3 and A5 subscriptions. We can go back and extend the ask again and see if this is something that they are willing to take advantage of now. Especially given the fires and the other natural disasters and things that are happening around the world, I think that this would be something that would make a lot of sense for us to have. I still do, and we just need to see if we can get someone to green light it and get it into A3 and A5. Looks like Tom says they're just at the start of this, but yeah, so that's the creating the enterprise application to get access to the graph endpoints. Okay, well, we've hit all the questions in the chat. Anything anyone else has? You can feel free to come off mute. You don't have to ask everything in the chat. Oh. All right. Well, if that's it, then we can end early today. I don't think
I'll
I
throw this
one
out. Hey,
Oh, now everyone wants to talk. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. No, we're gonna hold you up. You can't leave until we say so.
All right. What's going on?
So the one I have, this is absolutely not Microsoft related, but my daughter just texted me. She just passed her NAVLE exam. So she's in her 4th year of vet school.
Awesome.
And she just passed her national boards. So
that's awesome. That's great.
Hooray.
Congrats.
Richard, I have a question about Windows Update for Business and feature updates. Here at Cornell University, we've got co-management going on, and Windows Update for Business is sort of our first foray into leveraging Intune to provide patching. Like, we think there's a lot of great stuff about the drivers and the BIOS patching. As we're rolling it out to some specific areas of the university, we ran into an unintended issue. The team called it a unintended interaction. So there's a sort of standard patching about like what the standard patching ring, and then we had the feature update policy. And so what we were trying to do was make it so that if you had a Windows 10 machine, when you went to go like check for updates at the bottom and say, Windows 11 24 H2 is sitting there, and it's optional and for you to do it. And when we had these two things combined, even though it seemed like it was scoped right and staged correctly, what ended up happening was those machines were like, oh, hey, I'm going to go and get that update and sit it here like as staged for install. So I wasn't forcing a reboot, but it was like that. If you never rebooted, you want to get upgraded. However, it just it was putting so sort of like 200 devices later, we're learning like, oh look, this is happening, and there's something to be said about gets people to the latest and greatest. However, this was something my technical team would have been able to articulate this a little bit better, but where we had thought that we kind of were showing that it could be there and letting end users click it, it sort of like took action instead. And so there's sort of two parts of it. Once we removed the feature update policy, then everything kind of went back to normal, but we're trying to replicate the issue right now, and we've done it backwards from how we had it set up, and we can't get it to do it. So is there any kind of one of my someone who works on the Jamf MDM was like, there's sort of this thing where like if some stuff is included in one policy and there's like, and you've got overlapping policies, sometimes it's like one gets there before the other, or one decide like what's the thought or the choice there. And so really I'm trying to get a little bit of a direction on maybe what would be expected behavior, or in addition, one of the executive support people were in a conference room, and he was really worried because he could see when we pulled the scoped deployment, it actually removed that pending restart, and we're like, oh, that usually never is like that. Usually once it's there, it's going to do it, and you can't like undo it, and it checks back in, and then it goes and hides itself. So you got any flavor to add to sort of a lived experience, or a way to take that question in a team up kind of way?
Well, let me see if I understand what you're saying. So I'm sharing my screen right now. So you've got a feature update, and you're making it available to users as an optional update.
Yeah.
I don't know if you see my screen. Yeah. Okay. So you're doing that, and then your rollout options as soon as possible, just like this.
Yep.
Okay. And then on top of that, you also have a update ring. Do you know what you have for your feature update deferral period?
Let me see if I can grab that fast.
And then, yeah, Jonathan's asking about your deadlines too. So that's the next piece, is that like feature updates, deadlines. Because in general, I mean, I don't personally make things optional, at least when it comes to feature updates.
Yeah. So on, I did hear that too, from you, that earlier comment. So I'm looking at what we consider our standard central patching, and it is allow product updates, allow drivers, 7-day quality update deferral period, 0 days for update deferral period, and then
for feature updates are 0 days.
Yep.
Okay.
And
yeah.
Deadline for feature updates is no deadline for feature updates.
Okay, so you have no deadline set either. Okay. Yeah. And so you were saying that the feature update was just installing it. It seemed like it was installing on its own without the end user selecting it.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
If you want, I can share the screen, and if it is helpful, I don't know if it is, or I tried to post a screenshot in the Q&A, but it wouldn't really take it. But on the feature update section, there is we have one set up where it says required or optional update is optional, and then install Windows 10 on devices not eligible to run Windows 11 disabled. So one of the assignments, we sort of try to layer the things on top of each other. So there's the standard patching experience that a user would get through Windows Update for Business, but then making Windows 11 24H2 through feature updates as optional, but it was included into the whole standard patching.
Oh, are you guys also using co-management with SCCM?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, that might. I'm wondering if there's some sort of thing between both co-management and Intune that, and I assume you guys were probably using Windows Update management within SCCM at some point. Did you move the Windows Update workload completely over to Intune already?
I don't have a good answer for that. It might be just on the pilot slider for right now for that group, but that's a good piece of information to have about because we are WSUS based configuration manager patching, and we're actually using a standard patching set of collections that dictates the behavior. And so the slider is slid, but I don't have CM open fast enough to actually get you to that. But that, knowing that there might be some other kind of tug of war going on between Intune and CM on that one specifically as a place to check Because at first we thought like this is just...
and what I have seen, I haven't personally experienced it, but what I have seen is in some cases, some of the policies that were set from Config Manager end up cached on the device, and then you move the workload over to Intune and you start deploying things through Intune using the update rings. Those cached policies do sometimes conflict. It's not that behavior is not intended. I think it's a bug, but I've seen it in some cases. I haven't directly like troubleshot it and worked through it, but I've seen that happen, you know, on Reddit and other community locations where people are sharing a lot of this stuff. So I know that behavior is out there, but it's possible that you might be running into some weird policy that might be stuck local from Config Manager. Without really looking at the device and logs and all that other stuff, it's really hard to say at this point.
Cool. Well, thanks a lot for spending some time here on trying to help sort of just get a sense of where to look. Because as we did it one way, we're like, okay, this doesn't work this way. Let's do the opposite. And then we were like, we expected that we would see the same behavior. And once it didn't happen, it was like, now we don't know what to trust. But I think that's a great idea of, because we were really still just thinking this of like, oh, this is directly an Intune versus Intune sort of policy, either conflict or unintended interaction. But that piece of information of go check co-management and think about cached policies on devices, that's a great place to go. So thanks a lot for your help with that.
Yeah, no problem. What else? I got some more stuff here in the chat here. What are the chances Windows 10 doesn't understand how to handle an optional feature update from Windows Update for Business, since that's a fairly new option?
We wondered that too. Was there too old of a version of Windows 10 that it couldn't figure out what it was? So good question.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I thought optional was supported on 10, but I guess we have to look at the docs. Looks like David says ours works, at least from 10, 23H2 to 24H2. Yeah, so. Oh, Zadie, I think on that, so Zadie writes, not sure if anyone has asked already, but we have been seeing something happened and TPM attestation timed out when doing autopilot pre-provisioning on, or sorry, chat moved. Autopilot pre-provisioning on certain Dell laptops. These are TPM 2.0 devices with the latest TPM firmware and BIOS update. Any suggestions? Rudy Elms actually wrote a blog post on this for, I think it's on it might be on the Patch My PC blog. I don't know if it's there, if it's on his personal blog. I'd have to go dig the link up on it. But there is something, and I assume this is 24H2. Is that right? Is that it? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I think this is what he was blogging about. I'll have to go dig up where I saw that. It looks like Mike, Patch My PC does have, that's where he posts, because he has his own blog and he has the Patch My PC blog that he writes on now. So I don't know, Mike, if you can post that link. I don't have it offhand right now, but if you have it, Mike, put that in the chat so that way we can get that over to Zeddy. And then Jonathan's sharing the update policy CSP, configure deadline for future updates. That's the enforcement of the deadline to upgrade. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, clear TPM change, DKP. Yep, that's the blog post. And Leaf asked, did anyone else notice that some Mac keys are just stopped working or troubleshooter fixes it? I haven't heard anything about Mac keys stopping working. What can happen in that situation? I don't know about the troubleshooter piece, but if Mac keys stop working, if you're a relatively large organization, you might run out of Mac activation. Like you only get like 3,000 to 5,000 activations per Mac key. I can't remember off the top of my head what it is. But you can go request additional Mac activations from the Volume Licensing Support Center. Just call up support, say, hey, we need additional activations, and then they'll give you however many you need. So that can happen. And as far as the troubleshooter fixing something that stopped working and now works, I'm not quite sure what will cause that.
There's that little troubleshoot this problem button sometimes, and for whatever reason, I just have the little text go and hit that troubleshooter button, and for whatever reason, it just fixes it. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to worry about it. And we're moving stuff off of Mac. We have a KMS, and it's just moving more stuff to cloud. So
okay, were those machines upgraded to Windows 11?
Probably.
Okay.
I don't know if it was it was probably a clean upgrade or clean install where like you wipe the machine and you load Windows 11 versus an in-place upgrade though, if I had to guess.
Because I have seen that where,
Dan's seen it too.
Yeah, I've had a couple customers say that they have upgraded from Windows 10 to Windows 11, and then activation has failed, or it's, I guess failed is probably the wrong word. It hasn't retained the activation state from Windows 10 to Windows 11.
Yeah, I think it's to 24R2, 23 to 24R2.
Yeah, so the ones we've seen, it's going, even if you're on Windows 11, if you're on Windows 11 23H2 and you go to 24H2, that's when it loses its activation. And we're seeing it with remote laptops that do KMS, but people don't connect the VPN. And it just connect the VPN, run activate, and it works.
Yeah, so yeah, the customer that I was working with, they were telling me that Windows 10 to Windows 11 upgrades were fit, but it's probably the same thing, whether it's Windows 11 23H2 to 24H2, or whether it's Windows 10 22H2 to Windows 11 24H2. It's probably the same behavior regardless of where you're coming from. So yeah, that I have heard of. I'm not sure what causes it, or what the fix is to it, but that's what I've seen. What else? David says, I don't know if related, but we had an issue on 24H2 not activating via KMS, but rebooting a few times gets it to activate. Yeah, I think these are all along the same lines. Joseph mentions the same. And then Matthew says, we had to move over to licenses via user licenses instead of Mac, as student devices are frequently reloaded and we would run out of licenses. It'll solve the issue for us. Yeah, that goes back to what I was talking about with the Mac activations. Because every time you activate a machine with Mac, it reduces the number of activations you get with that Mac key. But you can always go talk to VLSC support and say you need additional Mac activations, and they will grant those for you. We've had to do tens of thousands of activations in some cases for customers as they're rolling out new devices for the new school year. So that's not uncommon. All right, but with that, we're pretty close to time now. So I think we'll go ahead and wrap here. If you guys have any other questions, well, I'd say post in the chat, but the chat goes away now because of how we've changed Teams. But thanks everyone for joining. We'll see you again in a couple weeks, and hope you guys have a good one. Take care. Thanks a lot.